Wolfmare's Guide to Better Thieving by Wolfmare Shadowcloak. So, you want to make it as a cutpurse. You want to live the life of a criminal, always one step ahead of everyone and pockets brimming with septims. Maybe it appeals to you to try and earn a living by robbing some wealthy merchants or extorting your local shopkeepers. Let me give you a bit of advice. Don't bother. For every skilled thief I have met in my day, I have seen a 20 who thought that they had what it took, but ended up rotting in jail. But if you're anything like me, you don't listen to advice. You do whatever you want and never let anyone else tell you otherwise. To oblivion with the risks. All that matters is the coin. Sound familiar? If it does, then this book might just teach you the difference between acting like a petty thief and a master criminal. I know what you're thinking. Who's this Wolfmare? Who does he think he is, telling me how to be a better thief? What makes him an expert? Simple. Maybe you heard about the haste in Mournhold, when Queen Varencia's coronation crown went missing. Or perhaps the tale of an elder scroll gone missing from the white gold tower reached your ears. That's right. It was yours truly. I have done just about every kind of job you can imagine. I got the septims put away to prove it. How else would an ex-thief find the resources to publish his own book? Now that I have your attention, let's start with two of the most fundamental skills you will need to sharpen if you want to make it as a cutpurse. Picking locks and picking pockets. And before you roll your eyes and throw this book aside in disgust, I can promise you that the easiest way you're going to get caught is by ignoring the basics. If you can master these activities, you will find yourself swimming in coin. Picking pockets is one of the easiest skills to learn, but you will be surprised how often I have seen novice thieves muck it up. The lesson here is twofold. First, know your surroundings, and second, know your approach. Where and when you decide to go fishing is just as important as who you choose as your mark. Follow them a while. There's never a need to rush. Wait until they are somewhere isolated and out of earshot of any guards. But most importantly, always know when to let the mark go. Getting pinched simply isn't worth the risk. There will always be plenty of other marks. You will come along with their pockets full. As far as the approach goes, don't drop into your crouch until you are completely out of the mark's view. Directly behind them, preferably close to them. Don't spend too long deciding what you will lift either. A good thief should be able to hit a mark and make off with something valuable in less than 5 seconds. Last of all, flying this trade at night will greatly reduce your chances of getting caught. If you have no other choice and you have to do it in daylight, just make sure you aren't out in the open. Lock picking is an art form that takes years to master. The important thing to remember is that no two are alike, each one behaving completely different. As long as you keep your wits about you and your patience, you will find them easier to defeat than you would initially expect. Good picks are always essential. Make sure you have plenty of them tucked away in your pockets. Always take your time and keep a light touch on the picks. When the tumblers begin to fall into place, you should feel the pick tremble ever so slightly. This means you're near the sweet spot. Slow down at that point and only move the picks with the finest touch. If you blindly poke at the lock like an old man, all you're going to end up with is a bunch of broken picks and equally broken pride. As a last resort, if the lock is completely confounding you, there's always the option of smashing it. Just keep in mind that this is rarely successful and could potentially make a great deal of noise. By using my techniques, I'm not merely suggesting you will be a successful thief, I'm giving you a solid guarantee. All it takes is a little bit of patience and a great deal of practice, then maybe, just maybe, you'll become as successful as Wolfmare. In my next volume, we will move on to another important tool in your arsenal, sneaking. I'll prove to you that the shadows can be just as potent of a weapon as your blade if you know how to bend it to your will. 3 Thieves by Anonymous. The problem with thieves today, say Leathers, is the lack of technique. I know there's no honor among thieves, and there never was, but there used to be some pride, some skill, some basic creativity. It really makes those of us with a sense of history despair. Emmeline sneered, slamming down his flagon of grief violently on the rough-hewn table. Vec, what do you want us to say? You ask us what do you do when you see a guard, and I says stab the fetcher in the back. What would you prefer? We challenge them to a game of chits. So much ambition, so little education, said Leathers with a sigh. My dear friends, we aren't mugging some North tourist fresh off the ferry. The Cobbler's Guildhall may not sound intimidating, but tonight, when the dues collection is housed there before being sent to the bank, the security is going to be tighter than a Quama's ass. You can just stab at every bag you encounter and expect it to make it into the vaults. Why don't you explain specifically what we would like us to do? Asked Dulcea calmly, trying to keep the tone of the group down. Most locals at the Blood and Plaster Corner Club in Tel Arun knew enough not to listen in, but she knew better than to take any chances. The common thief, said Leathers, pouring himself more grief, warming to his subject, sticks his dagger in his opponent's back. This may slay the target, but more often gives him time to scream and drenches the attacker in blood. Not good. Now a good throat slashing, properly executed, can both slay and silence a guard and leave the thief relatively blood-free. And after all, after the robbery, we don't want people seeing a bunch of blood-soaked butchers running through the streets, even in Tel Arun. That's likely to warrant suspicion. If you catch your victim lying down asleep or resting, you are in an excellent position. You place one hand over the mouth with your thumb under their chin. Then you use your other hand to slit the throat and quickly turn the head to one side so the body bleeds out away from you. There is a risk here of becoming bloodstained if you don't move the head quickly enough. If you're unsure, strangle the victim first to avoid the blood that tends to spurt out in 3-foot jets when someone is stabbed while alive. A very good friend of mine, a thief in Gnesis, whose name I won't mention, swears by that strange and slash technique. Simply put, you grab the victim's throat from behind, and while throttling him, you batter his face against the opposite wall. When the victim is thus rendered unconscious, you slash his throat while still holding him from behind, and the risk of staining one's clothes with blood is practically non-existent. The classic technique, which requires less grappling than my friend's variation, is to place one hand over the victim's mouth and then saw through the throat in 3 or 4 strokes, rather like playing a violin. It requires little effort, and while there's quite a bit of blood, it all sheds forward, away from you. There's no reason when one knows one is going to be slitting some throat not to take some precautions and bring some extra equipment. The best neck hackers I know generally carry a bit of wadded cloth on the aft side of their knives to keep blood from getting on their cuffs. It's impractical for this sort of assignment, but when you're only anticipating 1 or 2 victims, nothing beats throwing a sack over the target's head, drawing the string tight, and then supplying the killing blow or blows. Emmeline laughed loudly. Can I see a demonstration sometime? Very soon, said Leathers, if Galsaya has done her job. Galsaya brought up the map of the guild house, freshly stolen, and they began to detail out the strategy. The last several hours had been a whirlwind to all. In less than a day, the 3 had met, formulated a plan, bought or stolen the necessary ingredients, and were all about to execute it. Not one of the 3 were sure whether confidence or stupidity were driving the other 2, but the fates were aligned. The guild house was going to be robbed. When the sun set, Leathers, Dulcea, and Emmeline approached the cobbler's guild house on the east end of town. Galsaya used her cacos of stoneflower to mask their scent from the guard walls as the three passed over the parapets. She also acted as lead scout, and Lettuce was impressed. For someone of relative inexperience, she knew her way through the shadows. Lettuce's expertise was demonstrated a dozen times, and the guards was of such a diverse variety, he was able to demonstrate all the means of silent assassination he had developed over the years. Emmeline opened the vault in his unique and systematic method. As the tumblers fell beneath his fingers, he softly sang an old dirty tavern song about the 99 loves of Boethia. He said it, helped him focus and organize difficult combinations. Within seconds the vault was open and the gold was in hand. They left the guild house an hour after they entered. No alarm had been raised. The gold was gone, and corpses lay pooling blood on the stone floors within. "Well done, my friends, well done. You learned well," Ledos said as he poured the gold pieces into the specially designed compartments in his tunic sleeves, where they held fast with no jiggling or unusual bulges. "We'll meet back at the Blood and Plaster tomorrow morning, and split up the bounty." The group parted ways. The only person who knew the most covered route through the city's sewer system, Letos, slipped in through the duct and vanished below. Galsaya threw on her shawl, muddied her face to resemble an old fortune teller, and headed north. Emmeline headed east into the park, trusting his unnatural senses to keep him away from the city wedge. "Now I teach them the greatest lesson of all," thought Lettuce as he slushed through the labyrinthine tunnels of sludge. His guard was waiting where he left it at the city gates, making a laconic lunge on the jogweed shrub to which it had been leashed. On the road to Vivek, he thought of Galsaya and Emmeline. Perhaps they had been caught and brought in for questioning already. It was a pity he couldn't see them undergoing interrogation. Who would break under pressure first? Emmeline was certainly the tougher of the two, but Galsaya doubtless had hidden reserves. It was merely intellectual curiosity. They thought his name was Lettuce, and he was meeting them at the Blood and Plaster. The authorities wouldn't therefore be looking for a Dunmer named Sathis, celebrating his wealth miles and miles away in Vivek. As he prodded his mouth forward and the sun began rising, Sathis pictured Galsaya and Emmeline not undergoing interrogation, but sleeping the good deep sleep of the wicked, dreaming of how they would spend their share of gold. Both would wake up early and rush to the Blood and Plaster. He could see them now, Emmeline laughing and carry on, Galsaya hushing him to avoid bringing undue attention. They would take a couple of lagoons of grief, perhaps order a meal, a big one, and wait. Hours would pass, and so would their moods. The chain of reactions that every betrayed person exhibits: nervousness, doubt, bewilderment, anger. The sun was fully risen when Sathis reached the stables of his house on the outskirts of Vivek. He reined in his guard and filled its feet. The rest of the stalls were empty. It wouldn't be until that afternoon when his servants returned from the Feast of Sound Realms in Nisus. They were good people, and he treated them well. But from past experience he knew that servants talked. If they began to connect his absences with thefts in other towns, it was only a matter of time before they would go to the authorities or blackmail him. After all, they were human. It was best in the long run to give them a week off with pay whenever he was out of town on business. He slipped the gold into the vault in his study and went upstairs. The schedule had been tight, but Sathis had given himself a few hours to rest before his household returned. His own bed was wonderfully soft and warm compared to the dreadful mattress he had to use at the canton in Tel Arun. Sathis woke up some time later from a nightmare. For a second after he opened his eyes, he thought he could still hear Emmeline's voice nearby, singing the 99 loves of Boethia. He lay still in his bed, waiting, but there was no sound, except the usual creaks and groans of his old house. Afternoon sunlight came through his bedroom window in ribbons, catching dust. He closed his eyes. The sound returned. He closed his eyes. The sun returned, and Sathis heard the vault door in his study swing open. The smell of stoneflower filled his nose and he opened his eyes. Only a little of the afternoon sunlight could pierce the inside of the burlap sack. A strong, feminine hand clamped over the mouth and a thumb jabbed under his chin, just as his throat opened and his head was shoved to the side. He heard Dulcea in her typical calm voice. "Thank you for the lesson, Sathis."